In the heart of the English countryside, nestled amid thick, spectral fog, stood Blackwood Manor, a centuries-old mansion. It had always loomed like a forgotten sentinel, guarding the secrets of the past. The very air around it seemed to whisper tales of long-buried tragedies and the restless souls that still called it home. Sarah, a young historian with a penchant for uncovering forgotten stories, and her skeptical brother, James, found themselves the unexpected inheritors of Blackwood Manor. They arrived at the imposing gate, a wrought iron structure wrapped in ivy, their breath visible in the chilly fog. As they stepped through the gate, the world seemed to change. The fog thickened, swirling around them like a living entity. The mansion itself, with its weathered stone walls and crumbling spires, appeared to grow taller and more imposing with each step. Sarah's heart raced with a mix of excitement and trepidation. She had dreamt of uncovering the secrets hidden within Blackwood Manor's walls, but now, as the mansion loomed before her, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. "James," Sarah whispered, her voice barely louder than the rustling leaves. "Can you feel it? The weight of history here?" James rolled his eyes. "You always were the dramatic one, Sarah. It's just an old house." But Sarah knew better. She'd read about Blackwood Manor's dark past, about Lady Evelyn Blackwood, the tragic mistress of the house, who was said to have died under mysterious circumstances. They entered the mansion, and immediately a shiver ran down their spines. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of aged wood and something else, something indefinably eerie. Flickering candles lined the grand hallway, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Sarah couldn't resist running her fingers over the portraits that adorned the walls. As she did, she swore she saw the eyes of Lady Evelyn Blackwood follow her every move, their expressions shifting from sadness to anger. The first night was sleepless. Sarah and James retired to their separate rooms, but neither could escape the unsettling feeling that they were not alone. In the darkness, Sarah heard faint, mournful strains of a piano drifting up from below. "What is that?" she whispered to herself. The next morning, she questioned James about the music. He scoffed, attributing it to the old house settling. But Sarah knew it was more than that. It was a haunting melody, one that seemed to beckon her, drawing her closer to the secrets of Blackwood Manor. Days turned into weeks, and the siblings delved deeper into the mysteries of the mansion. Lady Evelyn's spirit, it seemed, was not content to remain hidden. She appeared to them as an apparition, her spectral form drifting through the hallways, her eyes filled with sorrow and anger. Sarah, driven by an insatiable curiosity, scoured the house for clues. In a dusty, forgotten corner of the attic, she stumbled upon an ancient diary. Its pages were filled with Lady Evelyn's words, a heartbreaking account of betrayal and despair. Sarah and James read in hushed tones, learning of Lady Evelyn's love for a dashing but treacherous suitor who had conspired with her own family to take her life and seize her fortune. Her ghostly torment was the consequence of a past filled with deceit and greed. As they pored over the diary, the temperature in the attic plummeted. Their breath hung in the air like frozen clouds, and the candles lining the room flickered wildly. Suddenly, Lady Evelyn's ghost materialized before them, her eyes ablaze with a mixture of rage and sadness. "You have uncovered the truth," she hissed. "But it changes nothing." Sarah and James trembled as they witnessed the vengeful spirit's anguish. Lady Evelyn's presence grew stronger, her fury intensifying with each passing day. She began to torment them, appearing at the foot of their beds, her mournful wails echoing through the mansion. The siblings felt trapped in a nightmare, their once promising inheritance now a prison. Sarah knew they had to find a way to appease Lady Evelyn's tormented soul and put her to rest. Late one night, guided by flickering candlelight, they ventured into the attic once more. Armed with the knowledge from Lady Evelyn's diary, they performed a solemn ritual, beseeching her spirit to find peace and forgiveness. As they chanted the words, the attic seemed to come alive. The spectral piano played a haunting melody, the portrait's eyes wept tears of sorrow, and a chill settled over the room. And then, in a burst of ethereal light, Lady Evelyn's ghost appeared once more. For a moment, her eyes held the same rage, but as she listened to their pleas, her expression softened. Slowly, she began to fade, her form dissolving into the cold, dark air. With one last, mournful sigh, she was gone. Sarah and James felt the mansion's oppressive atmosphere lift, the weight of history and tragedy finally dissipating. Blackwood Manor was still old and eerie, but it was no longer haunted by the vengeful spirit of Lady Evelyn Blackwood. As they left the mansion behind, Sarah and James couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. They had unraveled the dark past of Blackwood Manor, and in doing so, they had set Lady Evelyn's spirit free. But even now, as they looked back at the imposing mansion one last time, they knew that the echoes of its haunted history would linger, forever shrouded in the fog that clung to its ancient walls. Amidst the heart of a forgotten forest, concealed by gnarled and twisted trees, lay an abandoned cemetery. Its weather-worn gravestones, covered in thick moss, whispered tales of long-forgotten souls who had been laid to rest here. The wind, as it rustled through the overgrown foliage, seemed to carry with it the faint cries of these unremembered dead. Alex, a fearless paranormal investigator with a burning desire to prove the existence of ghosts, had heard whispers of this forsaken place. He was drawn to it like a moth to a flame, eager to unlock its chilling secrets. Armed with a flickering flashlight and an unyielding determination, he ventured deeper into the heart of the forest, guided only by the faint moonlight. As he approached the cemetery's rusted iron gate, he felt an unsettling chill crawl down his spine. The air grew heavy with the weight of the past, and he couldn't escape the sensation of being watched by countless unseen eyes. Yet, his excitement overpowered his fear, and he pushed open the gate, its hinges creaking in protest. The moment he stepped inside, a haunting hush settled over the forest, as though nature itself held its breath in reverence. Rows upon rows of moss-covered gravestones stretched before him, their inscriptions obscured by the passage of time. Alex's heart pounded with both excitement and trepidation. The night was quiet, save for the faint sound of distant, unearthly whispers that seemed to emanate from the very earth itself. The air was thick with anticipation, and Alex knew he was not alone. The restless spirits of the forgotten souls buried here were awakening. As he cautiously moved deeper into the cemetery, Alex caught fleeting glimpses of eerie apparitions, shadowy figures that flickered like candle flames in the moonlight. They whispered incoherent words, their voices laden with sorrow and longing. With each step, the atmosphere grew more unnerving, and the gravestones themselves seemed to shift and rearrange, as if the souls beneath them were reaching out for his attention. The cemetery's heart, a long-forgotten mausoleum, beckoned to him like a siren's call. Inside the mausoleum, a cold, damp air hung heavy, cobwebs draped like shrouds from the ceiling, and the flicker of his flashlight revealed ornate sarcophagi that lined the walls. Here, the whispers were louder, more desperate, as if pleading for recognition. As Alex reached out to touch one of the sarcophagi, an icy hand grabbed his wrist, its touch like a vice. He gasped in terror and stumbled back, only to see the spectral figure of a woman, her face etched in anguish, fading into the shadows. "Remember us," she pleaded in a voice that sent shivers down Alex's spine. "We are the forgotten, the unremembered. We seek retribution for our neglected souls." The weight of his audacious investigation now pressed upon him. These souls, abandoned and disregarded by the living, sought justice for their untimely and unremembered deaths. They moved closer, a spectral procession of mournful figures, each one carrying the heavy burden of their unfulfilled stories. Alex knew he had uncovered something far more profound than he had ever imagined. The importance of remembering the past, of acknowledging the lives once lived, weighed heavily on his conscience. He realized that his journey had taken him to a place where the line between the living and the dead blurred, and the consequences of neglecting the dead were made hauntingly clear. With newfound humility and reverence, he stepped back, his flashlight flickering like a fading ember. As he retreated from the mausoleum, he whispered his apologies to the restless souls, promising to share their stories with the world. The forest, once quiet, seemed to sigh in relief as Alex made his way back to the iron gate. The cemetery, now shrouded in moonlit fog, held its secrets close once more. As he emerged from the forgotten forest, he carried with him not only the weight of the unremembered dead but also the profound understanding that some mysteries were best left to rest in peace. Shadows of forgotten souls. Deep within the heart of a forgotten forest, a place untouched by the march of time, an abandoned cemetery lay hidden, a relic of ages past. The trees, gnarled and twisted, seemed to guard it jealously, casting long shadows that concealed the secrets of the unremembered dead. Alex, a fearless paranormal investigator with an insatiable curiosity, had spent his life chasing the enigma of the afterlife. His passion was to prove the existence of ghosts, to shed light on the eternal mystery. And now, rumors of a forsaken cemetery drew him into the heart of the forgotten forest. As he ventured deeper, the forest grew denser, and the air seemed to thicken with every step. A heavy silence settled over the surroundings, interrupted only by the occasional rustling of leaves and the mournful cawing of distant crows. The moon, shrouded by wisps of eerie fog, cast a pale, ghostly glow over the landscape. Alex's flashlight cut through the darkness as he made his way toward the heart of the forsaken cemetery. His heart raced with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The entrance to the cemetery was marked by a rusted iron gate, vines entwined around its bars as if trying to keep intruders at bay. With each creak of the gate, Alex felt as though he was stepping into another world, a realm where the boundary between the living and the dead blurred. Rows upon rows of gravestones, weathered by time and covered in thick, green moss, stretched out before him. Names and dates, worn away by the passage of centuries, whispered tales of forgotten souls who had been laid to rest here. Alex's footsteps echoed like distant thunder as he advanced further into the heart of the graveyard. It didn't take long for the atmosphere to change. A haunting chill settled in the air, as though the very earth itself mourned the souls beneath. The weight of the past bore down upon him, and he could not shake the sensation of countless unseen eyes watching his every move. The forest seemed to hold its breath, as if nature itself knew that this was a sacred place, a sanctuary for those who had been forsaken by time. The mournful sigh of the wind, the rustling of leaves, and the distant hoot of an owl created a symphony of melancholy. As Alex continued his exploration, he heard something otherworldly. A faint, unearthly whisper, like a breeze carrying long-forgotten secrets. The words were indistinct, whispers of voices long silenced by the passage of time. But he understood their plea, to be remembered. The whispering grew louder as he ventured deeper, and he glimpsed eerie apparitions in the corners of his vision, shadowy figures that flickered like candle flames in the moonlight. They seemed to reach out to him, yearning to break free from their forgotten existence. With each step, the cemetery's atmosphere grew more unnerving, and the gravestones themselves seemed to shift and rearrange, as if the souls beneath them were reaching out for his attention. He knew he was not alone. The restless spirits of the forgotten were awakening. His flashlight led him to the heart of the cemetery, a long-forgotten mausoleum concealed by creeping ivy. Its entrance was forbidding, the stone door sealed with age, but Alex felt a compelling urge to enter. He pushed open the door, and a cold, damp air engulfed him. Inside, cobwebs draped like shrouds from the ceiling, and the flicker of his flashlight revealed ornate sarcophagi that lined the walls. The whispers here were louder, more desperate, as if pleading for recognition and remembrance. As he reached out to touch one of the sarcophagi, an icy hand grabbed his wrist, its grip like a vice. His heart pounded, and he stumbled back, his flashlight illuminating the spectral figure of a woman. Her face etched in anguish, she seemed to fade into the shadows. "Remember us," she pleaded, her voice sending shivers down Alex's spine. "We are the forgotten, the unremembered. We seek retribution for our neglected souls." Alex's audacious investigation had taken a dark turn. These souls, abandoned and disregarded by the living, sought justice for their untimely and unremembered deaths. They moved closer, a spectral procession of mournful figures, each one carrying the heavy burden of their untold stories. With humility and reverence, Alex stepped back, his flashlight flickering like a fading ember. As he retreated from the mausoleum, he whispered his apologies to the restless souls, promising to share their stories with the world. The forest, once quiet, seemed to sigh in relief as Alex made his way back to the rusted gate. The cemetery, shrouded in moonlit fog, held its secrets close once more. He emerged from the forgotten forest, carrying not only the weight of the unremembered dead but also the profound understanding that some mysteries were best left to rest in peace. The spectral inheritance. The mansion on the desolate hill had always been a place of dread and whispers. Its dilapidated Victorian-era structure loomed perpetually shrouded in darkness, as if the sun itself refused to touch it. But when the Smith family inherited the mansion, they had no choice but to confront the chilling mysteries it held. The Smiths, a family of 4, had recently fallen into unexpected fortune. The news of their inheritance, a sprawling mansion that had been in their family for generations, was met with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The mansion had been abandoned for years, its reputation as a place of restless spirits and malevolent energies whispered through generations. As they approached the imposing wrought iron gates, an eerie stillness settled over the desolate hill. The wind whispered tales of the mansion's grim history, of the power struggles and betrayals that had unfolded within its walls. The mansion itself was a decaying relic of opulence. Its grand facade, adorned with Gothic arches and ornate balconies, was marred by time's relentless grasp. Gargoyles leered from the corners of the rooftop, their stony eyes seemingly mocking the Smiths' arrival. The atmosphere inside the mansion was heavy and oppressive, the air thick with the weight of history. The Smiths couldn't escape the sensation of being watched by unseen eyes, and whispers of spectral voices seemed to cling to the walls. As they settled into their new home, strange occurrences became commonplace. Mysterious footsteps echoed through the hallways at night, and the mirrors in the house bore a sinister quality, reflecting distorted faces and shadowy figures that weren't there. One evening, as the Smiths explored the mansion's labyrinthine corridors, they stumbled upon a hidden chamber concealed behind a bookcase. Within, they found a room adorned with portraits of their ancestors, each one staring down at them with expressions that seemed to change in response to their presence. Their exploration led them to doors that opened into blank walls and cold spots that sent shivers down their spine. Yet, they couldn't tear themselves away from the mansion's enigmatic depths. The turning point came during a stormy night when a sudden power outage plunged the mansion into darkness. Huddled together in the dim light of a single candle, the Smiths decided to conduct a seance, hoping to communicate with the restless spirits that haunted their home. They gathered around a wooden table, hands trembling as they placed their fingers on a vintage planchette. Their voices quivered as they invoked the spirits, their words carrying through the room like a haunting melody. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted, and the room grew icy cold. The planchette moved of its own accord, spelling out messages that seemed to come from beyond the veil of the living. The spirits, it seemed, were eager to communicate. But as the seance continued, the atmosphere grew more ominous. The spirits' messages became increasingly cryptic and malevolent. The planchette moved with an unnatural force, spelling out threats and curses, and the candles flickered wildly, casting eerie, dancing shadows on the walls. The Smiths tried to end the seance, but the spirits refused to release them. The room seemed to come alive, the portraits on the walls contorting into grotesque expressions, and the mirrors reflecting a nightmarish distortion of their faces. In a moment of desperation, the Smiths cried out, pleading for the spirits to cease their torment. Suddenly, the mansion shook with a deafening roar, and the room seemed to collapse upon itself. The walls closed in, the floor buckled, and the ceiling descended with crushing force. And then, as swiftly as it had begun, it was over. The room had returned to normal, the spirit's presence banished. But the Smiths knew that they had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. As they left the mansion behind, they couldn't help but wonder about the corrupting influence of power that had driven their ancestors to such depths of malevolence. The tragic consequences of ambition had left a dark stain on their family's history, one that they would never forget. The mansion on the desolate hill would forever be a place of dread and whispers, a testament to the haunting legacy of those who had once called it home. The Smiths had escaped its clutches, but they would carry the memories of their spectral inheritance with them for the rest of their lives. The Phantom of Hollow Hill. In the heart of the isolated village of Hollow Hill, where the very air seemed to be shrouded in a dense, never-ending fog, a dark history lay buried beneath centuries-old gravestones. The village was like a haunted painting, a place where time moved slowly, and the boundaries between the living and the dead blurred into an eerie, unsettling existence. Emily, a determined journalist with a relentless curiosity, had always been drawn to the mysteries that swirled around Hollow Hill. Whispers of ghostly apparitions and eerie happenings had reached her ears, and she could not resist the lure of the village's enigmatic past. As she arrived in Hollow Hill, the fog enveloped her car, swallowing the road ahead. The village streets were narrow, winding, and lined with flickering streetlights that cast long, sinister shadows. Hollow Hill seemed frozen in time, untouched by the modern world. The locals, a tight-knit and wary community, watched Emily with suspicion as she inquired about the village's eerie happenings. She learned of the malevolent spirit that was said to haunt Hollow Hill, a vengeful force born from a centuries-old curse. The village's dark history dated back to a time when it was a thriving, albeit secretive, settlement. Its inhabitants had practiced forbidden rituals and worshipped ancient, malevolent deities. The spirit, it was said, was a manifestation of the darkness that had consumed the village, seeking revenge for the atrocities committed in its name. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily ventured into the heart of Hollow Hill, armed with a notebook and a flashlight. The fog clung to her like a spectral presence, obscuring her vision and amplifying the eerie stillness of the village. As she explored, she began to notice strange symbols etched into the walls of buildings, a cryptic language that hinted at something ancient and sinister. The air grew heavy with an oppressive sense of isolation, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched by unseen eyes. One night, as she walked through the village, she heard a faint, chilling sound, the ghostly choir of a long-forgotten religious hymn. It seemed to emanate from the village's abandoned church, its eerie melody echoing through the fog-drenched streets. Driven by curiosity and an unshakable determination, Emily entered the church, her flashlight illuminating rows of empty pews and a decaying altar. The choir's haunting song grew louder, its ethereal voices echoing with an otherworldly resonance. And then, as she reached the altar, the singing abruptly ceased. The church was plunged into darkness, and the air grew icy cold. Emily felt a presence, a malevolent force that seemed to seep into her very soul. A ghostly apparition materialized before her, its form shifting and flickering like a wisp of smoke. Its eyes, hollow and filled with hatred, bore into Emily's very being. She stumbled back, her heart pounding with fear. "You meddle in matters beyond your understanding," the spirit hissed, its voice a chilling whisper that seemed to come from the depths of the abyss. "This village is cursed, and you shall share in our torment." Emily fled the church, her mind reeling with fear and confusion. The spirit's warning lingered in her thoughts, but she couldn't turn away from the truth she sought. She delved deeper into the village's history, unearthing tales of cursed relics and rituals that bound the spirit to Hollow Hill. In her quest for answers, Emily uncovered a hidden chamber beneath the village cemetery, a chamber that held the key to breaking the curse. Symbols etched into the chamber's walls revealed a ritual that could banish the malevolent spirit once and for all. As she prepared to perform the ritual, the fog outside thickened, and the village descended into an eerie silence. The ghostly choir returned, stronger and more haunting than before, as if warning her of the impending danger. With trembling hands, Emily followed the cryptic instructions, reciting incantations that echoed through the chamber. The air grew charged with an otherworldly energy, and the symbols on the walls seemed to come to life, casting dancing shadows. And then, with a blinding burst of light, the malevolent spirit materialized before her, its rage and desperation palpable. It tried to disrupt the ritual, but Emily's determination was unwavering. As she completed the final incantation, a brilliant surge of energy engulfed the spirit. It let out a blood-curdling scream, its form writhing and distorting. And then, with a deafening roar, it vanished, leaving behind a chilling silence that seemed to stretch into eternity. Hollow Hill was finally free from the curse that had plagued it for centuries. The fog began to dissipate, revealing a village bathed in the light of dawn. The locals emerged from their homes, their wary expressions replaced by relief and gratitude. Emily had lifted the curse, but she knew that the village's dark history would never truly fade. The consequences of meddling with the supernatural were a burden she would carry with her for the rest of her life. As she left Hollow Hill behind, she couldn't help but wonder about the tragic fate of those who had once inhabited the village, and the price they had paid for their ambition and arrogance. The malevolent spirit was gone, but the echoes of its torment would linger in the memories of Hollow Hill's residents, a reminder of the dark legacy they could never escape. The Haunting of Whispering Pines. Whispering Pines, nestled deep within a foreboding forest of ancient, towering trees, had long been a place where nature and the supernatural seemed to converge. It was a remote cabin, seemingly untouched by time, that drew Mark and Lisa, a couple in search of a quiet, romantic getaway. Little did they know that their retreat would take a sinister turn into the realm of malevolent woodland spirits. As they drove deeper into the forest, the towering trees closed in around them, their branches forming an impenetrable canopy that blotted out the sun. The air grew thick with tension, and the whispers of the wind seemed to carry haunting echoes. Whispering Pines, with its rustic charm and secluded location, was the perfect escape from the demands of their busy lives. The cabin stood as a solitary sentinel amidst the ancient trees, its windows reflecting the dappled sunlight that filtered through the leaves. Mark and Lisa settled into the cabin, their excitement for the weekend ahead tinged with anticipation. The forest, however, seemed to pulse with an unnerving energy. The gentle rustling of leaves took on an ominous note, and the shadows cast by the towering trees danced with a peculiar, elusive grace. Their first night at Whispering Pines was marked by an eerie chorus of whispers that seemed to emanate from the very trees themselves. It was as if the forest had a voice, a haunting melody of secrets that drifted through the air. Mark and Lisa exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of the source of the unsettling sounds. As they ventured deeper into the forest, they began to catch glimpses of elusive shadowy figures darting between the ancient trees. These apparitions, if they could be called that, seemed to watch Mark and Lisa with hollow, empty eyes. Fear crept into their hearts as the boundary between the natural and supernatural world blurred before their eyes. The forest held more mysteries than they could have imagined. Hidden symbols etched into the trees, and stones seemed to suggest a sinister presence lurking just beyond their vision. Mark, a curious soul, decided to investigate further, while Lisa couldn't shake the feeling of impending danger. One evening, as Mark followed a trail of symbols deeper into the woods, he stumbled upon an old, faded journal half buried beneath fallen leaves. Its pages were filled with the ramblings of a previous visitor, desperate warnings of malevolent spirits that haunted Whispering Pines. The journal spoke of a curse that had befallen the cabin and the forest itself, a curse born of ancient rituals and offerings to dark entities. It told of the spirits that had once been bound to this place, restless and vengeful, seeking retribution for the intrusion of the living. Mark returned to the cabin, his face pale with dread, and shared the journal's unsettling contents with Lisa. They realized that they were not alone in Whispering Pines, and the spirits of the forest were far from benevolent. That night, as they lay in their cabin, the whispers in the wind grew louder, their voices becoming an eerie chorus of malevolence. The cabin seemed to shudder, and the ancient trees outside seemed to move with a life of their own, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Spectral apparitions manifested within the cabin's walls, their ethereal forms taking shape in the moonlight. Mark and Lisa watched in terror as the spirits closed in, their hollow eyes fixated on the intruders who dared to disturb their cursed domain. Desperate to break free from the malevolent forces that surrounded them, Mark and Lisa decided to confront the spirits. Armed with the knowledge from the journal, they began a ritual to appease the vengeful entities that haunted Whispering Pines. The cabin's walls seemed to tremble as they chanted ancient incantations and offered tributes to the spirits. The forest outside fell silent, and the whispers in the wind ceased, as if awaiting the outcome of the ritual. And then, with a blinding flash of light, the spirits manifested before them, their forms shifting and twisting. The cabin was filled with a frigid, supernatural energy, and Mark and Lisa's very breath seemed to freeze in their throats. "You have trespassed upon our realm," one of the spirits hissed, its voice a haunting echo. "But your reverence has appeased us. Leave this place, and we shall trouble you no more." Mark and Lisa, their fear palpable, nodded in agreement. With a final incantation, the spirits dissipated into the shadows, and the cabin's walls ceased their trembling. The ancient trees outside returned to their silent vigil. As Mark and Lisa fled Whispering Pines, They couldn't help but wonder about the fragile boundary between the natural and supernatural world. The forest had revealed its dark secrets, and they had paid the price for their intrusion. The echoes of the malevolent spirits would linger in their memories, a chilling reminder of the consequences of meddling with forces beyond human comprehension. Whispering Pines, once a place of tranquility, would forever be a realm haunted by the restless souls of the forest, a place where the whispers in the wind concealed the chilling tales of the supernatural. The Forgotten Orphanage, deep within the desolate, fog-shrouded countryside, nestled like a forgotten relic, stood an abandoned orphanage, a place that had once been a refuge for the lost and the lonely. Now, it was a decaying labyrinth of sorrow and despair, its crumbling walls echoing with the tormented cries of the children who had once called it home. Rachel, a curious urban explorer with a heart that yearned for forgotten stories, had heard whispers about the forsaken orphanage, rumors of disembodied laughter, ghostly footsteps, and children's drawings that seemed to appear out of thin air had drawn her to this place, a place where the cries of the forgotten resonated in the stillness of the fog-shrouded countryside. As she approached the orphanage, its facade loomed like a specter through the mist. The windows, shattered and empty, seemed to watch her with hollow eyes. The wind whispered through the overgrown grass, and the air was thick with a melancholic weight. Rachel pushed open the creaking door and stepped into a world frozen in time. The orphanage's interior was a haunting tableau, a place where toys lay broken, and faded photographs of smiling children adorned the walls. The echoes of children's laughter seemed to linger in the air, distant and ethereal. Rachel's footsteps were swallowed by the silence as she ventured deeper into the orphanage's darkened corridors. She could feel the eyes of the lost souls upon her, their presence like a shroud of sorrow. As she explored further, she came upon a room filled with children's drawings, vibrant and haunting, depicting scenes of innocence and longing. One drawing, in particular, caught her eye, a depiction of a lonely child staring out of a window, the world outside obscured by thick fog. The drawing seemed to appear out of nowhere, as if the orphanage itself were trying to tell its story through the art of the children who had once sought solace within its walls. The night descended with a heavy sigh, and Rachel continued her exploration, the eerie stillness broken only by the occasional gust of wind that seemed to carry whispers of the forgotten children. The orphanage had more secrets to reveal, and Rachel was determined to uncover them. As midnight approached, Rachel ventured into the attic, a place shrouded in darkness and filled with a haunting sense of anticipation. It was there that she found a forgotten journal, its pages filled with the handwritten thoughts and dreams of the orphanage's young inhabitants. The entries spoke of loneliness, abandonment, and the yearning for a family that would never come. Rachel's heart ached as she read the words of innocent souls who had been left behind by a world that had forgotten them. But as she turned the pages, a sense of dread settled in her chest. The journal's final entry was marked with a trembling hand and tears that had blurred the ink. It told of a night when the children had gathered in the attic, their voices raised in a haunting chorus of nursery rhymes. Rachel, driven by a compulsion she couldn't explain, climbed into the attic's darkness. And there, in the dim light of her flashlight, she saw them, the children, their spectral forms huddled together, singing their mournful nursery rhymes. Their eyes were filled with a longing that transcended the boundaries of the living and the dead. Rachel realized that the orphanage had become a prison for their tortured souls, a place where the weight of abandonment and neglect bound them to this world. With a heavy heart, she began to sing along with the children, her voice joining their ethereal chorus. As she sang, the walls of the orphanage seemed to tremble, and the cries of the lost children grew louder, more desperate. And then, with a shattering crescendo, the spirits of the children began to dissipate, their forms fading into the darkness. Their voices, once filled with sorrow, turned into whispers of gratitude and release. The orphanage, once a place of suffering and despair, was finally free from the weight of its tragic past. Rachel had given the lost children the solace they had sought for so long. As she left the abandoned orphanage behind, she couldn't help but wonder about the suffering of innocent souls and the burden of abandonment and neglect. The echoes of the forgotten children's cries would linger in her memory, a haunting reminder of the price paid by those who were left behind by a world that had failed them. The Cursed Lighthouse. On a jagged cliff, where the relentless sea met the endless sky, stood a desolate and storm-battered lighthouse. This lonely sentinel of the coast had witnessed countless tempests and shipwrecks, its solemn duty to guide sailors safely through the treacherous waters. Captain Jackson, a weathered and resolute man, was the keeper of this haunted lighthouse. He had spent years tending to its needs, oblivious to the malevolent spirit that lingered within its time-worn walls, a spirit seeking revenge for a tragedy long past. The lighthouse, perched on the edge of a world where sea and sky merged into an indistinguishable gray, was a place of isolation and ominous beauty. The ceaseless crash of waves against the cliffs below filled the air with a haunting symphony of nature's fury. The lighthouse's beacon, a stark and ghostly glow against the encroaching darkness, swept the horizon with its eerie light. Its purpose was to guide sailors away from peril, but its history was marred by a curse that refused to fade. Captain Jackson, dedicated to his duty, kept a meticulous record of every ship that passed through his watchful gaze. He maintained logs filled with the names of vessels that had braved the relentless sea, only to be devoured by its unforgiving depths. Yet, there was one name that haunted the logs, the name of the ship that had met its doom on these treacherous waters, carrying with it the souls of the damned. As the stormy nights descended upon the lighthouse, Captain Jackson often found himself surrounded by an eerie presence, an unseen force that whispered mournful secrets in the wind. Phantom ship sightings, ghostly apparitions, and disembodied whispers filled the lighthouse with a haunting aura of the supernatural. The ghostly whispers carried tales of betrayal and tragedy, of a shipwrecked sailor who had met his end on these very cliffs. His restless spirit sought revenge against the cruel fate that had befallen him, and he saw Captain Jackson as the embodiment of the lighthouse's curse. One fateful night, as the tempest raged outside, Captain Jackson was drawn to the lighthouse's lantern room. The relentless pounding of the waves against the cliffs seemed to echo in his very bones. And there, in the lantern room, he saw it, the ghostly figure of the shipwrecked sailor, his form translucent and ethereal. His eyes burned with a vengeful fire as he reached out toward Captain Jackson, a spectral hand extended. "You bear the curse of this wretched place." The sailor's voice echoed through the room, a chilling accusation. "You must pay for the sins of those who came before you." Captain Jackson, shaken to his core, realized that he was in the presence of a vengeful spirit, a spirit that sought retribution for a tragedy that had occurred long before his time. Desperate to appease the ghost and break the curse that had plagued the lighthouse for generations, Captain Jackson delved into the archives, searching for clues about the shipwrecked sailor's fate. As he combed through the dusty records, he uncovered a tale of betrayal and greed. The shipwrecked sailor had been a humble crewman aboard a vessel that had been lured onto the treacherous rocks by a false signal from the lighthouse. The betrayal had cost the lives of all aboard, and the sailor's anguish had bound his spirit to the very place of his demise. Armed with this knowledge, Captain Jackson confronted the ghostly sailor once more, his voice filled with remorse and empathy. He vowed to honor the memory of the lost souls and to ensure that the lighthouse's beacon would forever guide ships safely through the perilous waters. The ghostly sailor, his eyes no longer burning with vengeful rage, nodded in acceptance. With a final, mournful sigh, he dissipated into the ether, his spirit finally finding peace. From that day on, Captain Jackson tended to the lighthouse with renewed purpose, his heart heavy with the enduring legacy of tragedy at sea. The cursed lighthouse had been freed from its malevolent past, and its beacon continued to shine brightly, guiding sailors away from peril and toward safe shores. As Captain Jackson looked out at the ceaseless crash of waves against the cliffs, he couldn't help but wonder about the relentless power of the sea and the enduring legacy of those who had perished beneath its tumultuous waves. The lighthouse stood as a testament to the price paid by those who dared to brave the treacherous waters, a place where the cries of the lost would forever echo in the salty breeze. The Malevolent Mirror. In a forgotten corner of the city stood an old, decrepit mansion, its grandeur faded with time. Its walls were adorned with ornate, antique mirrors of all shapes and sizes, each concealing a sinister secret within its glass. This was a place where every reflection held a malevolent entity, waiting patiently for its next victim. Mia, an antique collector with a fascination for the macabre, had always been drawn to the old mansion's mysterious allure. Rumors of mirrors that held trapped souls and reflections that whispered forbidden secrets had piqued her curiosity. Little did she know that her fascination with the unknown would lead her down a path of darkness. One fateful day, while perusing the mansion's collection, Mia's eyes fell upon an ornate, cursed mirror. Its frame, adorned with intricate carvings, seemed to beckon her closer. As she gazed into its glass, a sense of foreboding washed over her, but she couldn't tear herself away. Unbeknownst to Mia, her reflection in the cursed mirror concealed a malevolent spirit, a being that had languished within the glass for centuries, bound by a curse that hungered for release. With Mia's unwitting gaze, the spirit found its chance. The moment Mia brought the cursed mirror into her home, the malevolent entity was set free. It began its relentless pursuit, lurking in the shadows of her world, always just out of sight but never out of mind. At night, when the house was shrouded in darkness, Mia began to notice the mirrors in her home acting strangely. Her reflection would distort and contort, taking on a sinister visage. Eerie voices whispered from within the glass, their words filled with malice and deceit. As the days turned into weeks, Mia's once refined appearance began to wither. Dark circles formed under her eyes, and her once lustrous hair lost its sheen. Her obsession with the cursed mirror grew, and she found herself spending hours staring into its depths, captivated by the malevolent entity that dwelled within. The antique mirrors throughout her home became her prison, their reflections twisting and warping her perception of reality. She was trapped in a claustrophobic nightmare, her own vanity and curiosity binding her to the malevolent spirit that sought to claim her soul. One evening, as Mia stood before the cursed mirror, her reflection began to change. Her eyes, once filled with life, now mirrored the darkness that lurked within the glass. Her lips curled into a sinister smile that was not her own. The malevolent spirit had grown stronger, and it sought to merge with Mia's very being, to consume her soul and escape the confines of the mirror realm. In a moment of desperation, Mia reached out and shattered the cursed mirror with a heavy object. The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces, and for a brief moment, she felt a surge of relief. But her respite was short-lived. The malevolent entity, now free from the shattered mirror, surrounded her. It spoke with a chorus of eerie voices, each one more chilling than the last. "You cannot escape us, Mia," the voices hissed. "We are a part of you now, and you are a part of us." Mia's heart raced as she realized the truth. She had become a vessel for the malevolent spirit. It coursed through her veins, its malefic presence consuming her from within. Desperate to sever the connection, Mia sought the help of a paranormal expert, a man who had faced malevolent entities before. He arrived at her home, carrying with him ancient incantations and sacred artifacts. As he performed the rituals to banish the malevolent spirit, Mia felt its grip on her soul weakening. The mirrors in her home cracked and splintered, and the entity's eerie voices grew fainter. In a final, chilling confrontation, the malevolent spirit made one last attempt to claim Mia's soul. The mirrors in her home shattered in unison, and the entity emerged from the glass, its form a twisted, shadowy figure. With a resounding chant and a blinding flash of light, the paranormal expert banished the malevolent spirit back into the cursed mirror from whence it came. The mirror was sealed with ancient runes, its malefic power contained once more. Mia, her body and soul scarred by the ordeal, was finally free from the clutches of the malevolent mirror. She had learned the dangers of delving too deeply into the unknown, of letting one's vanity and curiosity lead to obsession. As she looked around her shattered home, surrounded by the remains of her once beloved antique mirrors, she couldn't help but wonder about the malevolent entity that had sought to claim her soul. The mirrors, now devoid of their sinister secrets, stood as a stark reminder of the price paid by those who dared to peer too deeply into the malefic abyss of the unknown. The Phantom Express. At the edge of a dense, haunted forest, where the trees loomed like sentinels guarding the secrets of the night, stood an old, abandoned train station. Its time-worn structure, draped in creeping ivy and shrouded in mist, had witnessed the passage of countless travelers, both living and dead. Sam, a curious traveler with an insatiable thirst for adventure, had heard rumors of the spectral train that arrived at the station precisely at midnight. Its eerie allure had captured his imagination. And on a moonless night, with the winds whispering tales of the unknown, he decided to embark on a journey that would lead him into the heart of the supernatural. As the witching hour approached, Sam stood on the platform of the forsaken train station, the spectral glow of the lanterns casting long, wavering shadows. The air was thick with an otherworldly presence, and he could hear the faint rustling of leaves in the haunted forest beyond. Suddenly, a mournful whistle pierced the silence, and from the depths of the forest, a ghostly train appeared, a spectral locomotive with ethereal wisps of fog billowing from its rusty stack. It glided along the tracks that seemed to lead nowhere, its windows filled with the faint, shimmering outlines of ghostly passengers. Intrigued and unafraid, Sam boarded the phantom train, stepping into a world where the boundaries between the living and the dead blurred into surreal uncertainty. The train's interior was an eerie blend of the familiar and the spectral. Dust-covered seats, tattered curtains, and flickering lanterns created an atmosphere that was both haunting and surreal. And yet, as Sam gazed upon the spectral passengers who occupied the seats around him, he felt a shiver crawl down his spine. Their faces were gaunt and pale, their eyes empty voids that seemed to see beyond the mortal realm. They sat in silence, their spectral forms barely touching the seats, as if they were tethered to the train by an invisible thread of despair. At the front of the train, a cryptic conductor, his face concealed beneath the brim of his hat, moved with an otherworldly grace. His skeletal hands gripped an ornate pocket watch, its hands frozen in time, and he muttered incantations beneath his breath. As the phantom train journeyed deeper into the haunted forest, Sam couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The train seemed to move through a never-ending landscape of twisted, gnarled trees, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers to snatch at the night. Time lost its meaning as the journey continued, and Sam began to understand the eerie allure of the unknown, a fascination that drew him deeper into the surreal realm of the Phantom Express. Hours, days, or perhaps even years passed, and still the train carried its ghostly passengers through the spectral landscape. The unending nature of their suffering became apparent, a cycle of eternal torment that bound them to this spectral journey. As Sam looked into the empty eyes of the passengers, he realized that they were trapped, unable to escape the never-ending cycle of the Phantom Express. They were prisoners of a haunting secret that had bound them to this spectral locomotive for all eternity. Desperate to uncover the truth, Sam approached the cryptic conductor, who regarded him with hollow eyes. With a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of the abyss, the conductor whispered the chilling revelation. "We are the souls of those who dared to board the Phantom Express," he intoned. "We sought the unknown, and in doing so, we became a part of it. We are forever caught in a journey without end, a haunting existence that knows no escape." Sam's heart sank as he realized the consequences of his curiosity. He had become one of the spectral passengers, forever bound to the Phantom Express, doomed to wander through the haunted forest for all eternity. The train continued its endless journey, its wheels grinding against the rusted tracks, its lanterns casting a spectral glow. Sam, now a ghostly figure among the otherworldly passengers, sat in silence, his eyes empty and his soul trapped in the unending cycle of suffering. As the Phantom Express disappeared into the depths of the haunted forest, its mournful whistle echoing in the night, Sam couldn't help but wonder about the eerie allure of the unknown. The train had become a vessel for the unending nature of suffering, a place where the living and the dead became one, and where the boundaries of reality dissolved into the surreal. The Curse of Ravenwood Manor. Ravenwood Manor, a sprawling and cursed estate, stood as a looming monolith amidst an ancient, overgrown forest. The very land upon which it was built seemed to pulsate with an otherworldly energy, an eerie testament to the malevolent forces that had plagued the Ravenwood family for generations. The cursed descendants of the Ravenwood family, bound by a dark legacy that had tormented them for centuries, were prisoners within the walls of the foreboding manor. Each generation had borne the weight of a curse they could neither understand nor escape. As the moon cast an eerie pallor upon the twisted trees that surrounded the manor, the Ravenwood family assembled in the grand foyer, a space adorned with sinister portraits of ancestors who had succumbed to the curse. Their faces, frozen in time, bore expressions of terror and despair. Eleanor, the matriarch of the Ravenwood family, her once regal countenance now marked by the weight of the curse, addressed her descendants. "The time has come for us to confront our dark legacy," she declared, her voice filled with a determined resolve. "We shall banish the malevolent entity that haunts this estate, and in doing so, break the curse that has bound us for centuries." The family members exchanged uneasy glances, their eyes betraying a mixture of fear and determination. For too long, they had suffered the malevolence that lurked in the shadows, the entity that whispered sinister promises in the dead of night. The manor itself seemed to pulse with a dark energy, its walls echoing with spectral echoes of past suffering. Haunted portraits leered from their frames, their eyes following the Ravenwood family members as they moved through the grand halls. In a hidden chamber, tucked away behind a thorn-covered door, lay a family journal, an ancient tome that chronicled the cursed history of the Ravenwood family. Eleanor retrieved the journal and began to read from its pages, her voice trembling with the weight of the past. "Generations ago, our ancestor, Lord Nathaniel Ravenwood, made a pact with a malevolent entity," she recited. "In exchange for wealth and power, the entity cursed our family, condemning us to a life of torment and suffering." The room seemed to grow colder as Eleanor spoke, and the family members huddled together, their breath visible in the chill. The journal spoke of rituals and sacrifices, of desperate attempts to break the curse that had ultimately failed. But Eleanor believed that there was hope, a way to confront the malevolent entity and banish it from Ravenwood Manor. She outlined a plan that would require unity among the family members, a willingness to face their darkest fears, and a ritual that would bind the entity and sever its connection to the manor. As the clock struck midnight, the Ravenwood family gathered in the dimly lit chamber at the heart of the manor. The walls were adorned with the sinister family tree, its twisted branches bearing the names of ancestors who had fallen to the curse. Eleanor led the ritual, her voice steady and unwavering. The family members held hands, forming a circle of unity, and recited incantations passed down through generations. Suddenly, the chamber was filled with a malevolent presence, a dark, swirling entity that seemed to materialize from the very shadows themselves. It hissed and writhed, its form ever-changing, as if it were a manifestation of the family's collective suffering. The Ravenwood family stood firm, their determination unwavering as they confronted the entity. The malevolent force lashed out, tempting them with promises of power and wealth, but the family held fast. In a final, climactic moment, Eleanor invoked the power of unity and recited an incantation that bound the malevolent entity. It let out a deafening wail of despair as it was ensnared by an otherworldly force, its dark form slowly dissipating into nothingness. As the entity vanished, a profound stillness settled over Ravenwood Manor. The family members released their held breath, their hearts pounding with both fear and relief. They had faced their darkest fears and emerged victorious. Eleanor's eyes welled with tears as she looked upon her family. "We have broken the curse," she declared, her voice filled with awe. "Our ancestors may finally rest in peace, and our descendants shall know a life unburdened by the malevolent forces that plagued us." The manor, once a place of darkness and suffering, seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The haunted portraits now bore expressions of release, their eyes no longer filled with torment. As the first light of dawn broke through the overgrown forest, the Ravenwood family emerged from the chamber, their faces marked by the trials they had endured. They had faced the curse head-on, and in doing so, had broken the chains that had bound them for centuries. As they looked out upon the ancient forest, now bathed in the soft, golden light of morning, they couldn't help but wonder about the burden of family legacy. The curse had been a formidable foe, but the power of unity against evil had proven even stronger. Ravenwood Manor, once a place of malevolence, had become a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a place where darkness had been banished and the light of redemption had finally found its way.